Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Manrique was already finishing his shift when a new call came in. 93rd? The passenger wants to go from the mall to the new residential area. Will you pick them up? The operator dictated the address. Yes, Manrique said wearily. But this is my last ride, I'm already working overtime. Sighing, he turned the steering wheel and merged into traffic to make a left turn. The route wasn't too long, and it ended right near his home. He was heading in that direction anyway, so why not take it? Just as he pulled up to the main entrance of the department store, a young woman in a short coat and high boots practically leaped into the car. "Let's go, move," she excitedly said, and Manrique, barely shrugging, was about to start the ride. But then the front door opened again, and a middle-aged, distinguished-looking man said with a hint of reproach, peering into the cabin, "Why rush like this, dear? You nearly tore the door off." He smiled as he said this, but his smile held both strong dissatisfaction and even a hidden threat. The woman remained silent, looking at her interlocutor with the eyes of a cornered animal. Manrique, having seen all sorts of things, wasn't surprised by anything and just briefly glanced at the pair, asking, "So, shall we go?" "Of course," the man answered, sitting down in the back seat. "Go ahead, drive." There were no problems with that. The evening city road was well lit, it was already late, and there were almost no traffic jams. Cracking the window slightly, Manrique pulled out a cigarette and was about to light it. But the woman, still on the front seat, suddenly grabbed his sleeve. "Please, you don't need to," she looked at the driver with such a piercing gaze, as if she wanted to beg him for, at the very least, mercy. "You know, I absolutely can't stand tobacco smoke." Tears even appeared in her eyes, and Manrique could swear to that. Fine, he quickly said and put the cigarette back in his pocket. "There are passengers of all sorts, each with their own quirks." "Well, whatever, it's nonsense, he'll soon get there, drop them off, and then smoke in peace." Already reaching the new residential area, the final turn. Soon he'll reach the right building. What's this now? Manrique cursed as he saw that the passage was completely blocked by a garbage truck. Gonna have to go around. He reversed and pulled out of the narrow passage. The woman, tossing back her long blonde hair, looked at him again. "Can I pay with cash?" "Yep," Manrique nodded indifferently, hardly looking at her. "Here," she fished some bills from her pocket and shoved them into the slot near the gear shift. "No need for change." "Thanks," Manrique turned his head and with experienced eyes determined that there were much more bills than necessary. Conscience and professional experience tipped the balance in favor of the client, so he said, "You've made a mistake, there's too much here." He was about to return some of it, but the woman, who was clearly unstable, jumped out of the car again without waiting for him to come to a full stop. No, it's okay, don't worry," and she dashed off, almost stumbling on her high heels, towards the entrance. The man who had been silently sitting in the back, letting out an audibly heavy sigh, also emerged from the taxi. "Farewell, boss." Manrique wanted to drive off right away and head home, but he really wanted to smoke. He parked across from the entrance, reclined the seat, rolled down the window, and finally lit up, squinting slightly. Just then, the entrance doors slammed shut like a gunshot, and Manrique almost jumped out of his seat at the sudden noise. Bursting out of the building was his recent passenger, her coat flung open, her hair in disarray, followed by the man she had been riding with. They started yelling at each other right on the street, she trying to run away, he grabbing her, not letting go, she screaming. They were causing an absolute spectacle, it was like a nightmare unfolding right before his eyes. Well, it had absolutely nothing to do with him personally. "I guess I'll drive off slowly," Manrique decided, flicking the cigarette butt away. And then he remembered the money that had been lying there in a pile. As he turned around to count the bills, he came across a scrap of yellow notepaper with hastily scribbled words, "Help me, I beg you." He wants to kill me. Like that. And what would you have him think, especially after the scene he was witnessing right in front of him? With the window closed, the yelling became much less audible, but the grotesque scene continued, unfolding right before his eyes. The woman was futilely trying to break free, and the man had almost dragged her back into the building. Just a little bit more, the heavy metal doors slammed shut again, swallowing up the scandalous couple. Just a regular domestic dispute, Manrique lazily thought, recalling his own ex. They all start yelling, can't calm them down. Dismissing everything he had seen as everyday squabbling and feeling a sense of male solidarity, Manrique headed home. He turned up the music, lit up another cigarette, and settled in. "Well, buddy, how are you doing here? Did you clean up all the fish?" he asked the fluffy black cat that lazily approached him. The cat looked at Manrique with its unflappable yellow eyes and let out a single-syllable meow in a low, hoarse voice. "Meow." "So, all of them," Manrique summed up. "Well, it's all right, pal. I brought you food. Want some?" Talking to the cat, he kicked off his shoes, took off his jacket, and walked into the kitchen. He washed the cat's bowl, which had been licked clean, opened a packet of cat food, and plopped the contents into the plastic dish. "Here you go, come and get it." The cat didn't need much convincing. It was practically lifting its front legs in impatience, eager to get its evening dose of happiness. Manrique was also up for a quick snack. He put a kettle on the stove, a regular gas one with a whistle. He liked this kind, and the water tasted better from it. He couldn't count how many times he had argued about this with his ex-wife. Some might say, what a trivial thing to argue about. A kettle? But his ex could make a big deal out of anything. You couldn't take that away from her. Just then, Manrique caught himself thinking about that crazy passenger again. Oh, come on. But he couldn't shake off the image of her as someone doomed to die. It seemed like you wouldn't look like that unless you felt something like that. Or maybe women are just complicated. But why would she ask for help from a complete stranger? She could have gone to the police. Manrique sighed and shook his head to get rid of these nagging thoughts. After dinner, a simple pasta and meat dish, things seemed a bit better. He and the cat lounged on the couch and watched TV. The well-fed and content cat leaned its fluffy side against Manrique's hand and purred continuously, creating a field of tranquility around itself. But despite the cat's purring vibrations, Manrique still couldn't help but think about the woman who had asked for his help. What if he really is threatening her, planning to kill? Probably not letting her go anywhere. Look how she jumped into the car, probably wanted to get away from him, leave. And here I am, I read it and crumpled it up, tossed it in the door. But then again, what can I do? Go to the police with this note? They'll just laugh at me and send me away. Who wrote it? What's her name? Where do they live? I don't know anything. Although the address is known. Maybe I should report it? Finally, these nagging thoughts tormented Manrique so much that he fell asleep, not even bothering to turn off the TV. And he woke up suddenly, as if from an electric shock. Damn it, he cursed in cold sweat, fumbling under the couch for the remote control. He had dreamt, of course, of that restless passenger. As if she was right above him, leaning over, staring down at him with her huge frightened eyes, whispering softly. Help me, I beg you. Please wake up. Help me, he wants to kill me. I know he wants to kill me. The dream was shattered as if it had never happened. Manrique sat up on the couch, glanced at the peacefully snoring cat. The cat, having opened one eye and determined that the human wasn't heading to the kitchen to feed it, dozed back off. Manrique went out to the balcony, shivering from the morning cold, opened the window, lit a cigarette, and once again began to rethink his last ride from yesterday. The lady looks a bit spoiled, obvious at first glance. And the guy, indeed, seems suspicious. He's trying to act all simple, but his attire isn't low quality either. People don't usually wear such clothes to a new residential area. And his eyes keep darting around. Something clearly doesn't add up here, Manrique concluded, and decided to himself that tomorrow, if the opportunity arose and he happened to be nearby, he'd smoke by that entrance again. And it's also strange that she didn't write down any phone number on her note. You'd think it's logical to give your phone number if you're asking someone for help, right? But for some reason, she didn't. Didn't have time? No phone? Maybe he took her phone to stop her from getting help, and he's keeping it in that apartment, holding her captive? Manrique winced in discomfort, tired of endless speculations, and already realizing that he wouldn't have any peace until he figured out this situation. Or at least tried to. Luck was on his side for tomorrow, if you could call it luck, when closer to lunchtime he once again found himself near that same house in the new residential area. After buying a hamburger and coffee from a snack shop, Manrique comfortably settled in his workhorse of a car, facing the entrance, turned on some music, cracked the window, and began smoking, eating, and waiting for someone to come out or enter the building. For a long time, there was nobody at all. It was as if all the inhabitants of the apartment complex had disappeared. He finished everything, threw the trash into the nearest bin, and now he stood by the car, finishing his last cigarette. Not far away, a piercing ambulance siren sounded, and it drove into the courtyard, stopping right in front of the entrance where Manrique was situated. Two people got out of the ambulance with medical bags and white coats over their shoulders, and the driver also got out for a smoke. Manrique realized it was his chance and positioned himself behind the newcomers. He himself couldn't explain what he planned to do next. Well, he would enter the building, but then what? There were around 50 apartments. How could he possibly guess which one that woman was in, assuming she was still there at all? The arriving medical personnel entered the elevator, while he chose to take the stairs. He was ascending and berating himself internally. Idiot, why are you sticking your nose where it doesn't belong? What's this damn woman got to do with you, a complete stranger? Haven't you had enough problems with your own life? However, despite everything, he continued what he had started. He went, not rushing, up the stairwell, examining the apartments. When he reached the third floor, he heard the elevator stop on the floor above, and the medics got out. A male voice, which seemed familiar to Manrique, hurriedly said, "This way, please, quickly." He ascended another flight and cautiously peered around the corner of the stairwell. The voice was coming from the right, and the door they had just entered closed right before his eyes. "Geez," he said quietly aloud and shook his head in surprise. A very strange coincidence. Just arrived, just entered, and here you go. And the ambulance as if on cue, and the male voice of the same guy who was with the lady yesterday, practically as if on cue. Here it is, the right apartment. He was sure he didn't make a mistake. He moved to the trash chute and pulled out another cigarette, lit it, nervously glancing at the dusty small horizontally elongated window of the entrance. 10 minutes later, the door opened again. Manrique, looking down through the stairwell bars, saw the medics come out, and right after them, a minute later, the same guy from yesterday. After waiting for a while, Manrique went downstairs and approached the door. He raised his hand to the doorbell and was about to press the button, but changed his mind, withdrew his hand, and, pressing his ear to the door, listened. Then he took the doorknob and pressed it gently. The latch gave way, and the door opened quietly. So, it seemed right that he didn't lock the door, flashed through Manrique's mind. He was seized by some unhealthy excitement and curiosity, and he entered the apartment without even thinking about what would happen if there's someone else inside besides this woman. What if they mistake him for a thief or a robber? Or maybe her husband or whoever he is will return any minute now. However it may be, Manrique cautiously moved to look around. The kitchen was empty, only the quietly murmuring small TV on the wall was on. No one in the large room either. And this is likely the bedroom. He also entered here. What's there to lose? On the large double bed, covered with a blanket, lay the same woman from yesterday. He immediately recognized her by her light shiny hair, although she lay on her side, facing away from the door, and her face couldn't be seen. "Hey!" Manrique called quietly, approaching cautiously. "Are you okay?" The woman didn't answer and didn't even move. So he walked around the bed and looked at her face. She lay with her eyes closed and breathed evenly and calmly. Next to her on the bedside table were numerous vials, scattered tablets, and a disposable syringe lay on a torn package. They injected her with something, and she fell asleep, Manrique guessed. Then he heard the sound of an opening door, and his heart raced with excitement, like an engine in second gear when climbing a hill. Darn it, I'm stuck. Manrique cursed himself. What to do now? Where to hide? He will have to explain himself to the apartment owner and most likely deal with the police. And he doesn't even have that damn note with him. Oh God, what a fool he is. Should he hide under the bed, really? Fortunately, the returning man, if it was him, wasn't in a rush to enter the bedroom. He was making noise in the kitchen, turned the TV louder. Manrique had some time to think. Quickly surveying the room, he approached the window and pulled apart the dense curtains that barely let any light through. There was a balcony outside the window. There it was, his salvation. He could stay here until the guy leaves again. After sliding the curtains back into place as they were and sliding his hand between the curtain panels, Manrique cautiously opened the balcony door, praying that it wouldn't creak. The plastic door opened easily, almost silently, and let in a stream of fresh March air into the room. Thank God. He rejoiced to himself and slipped onto the small balcony. On the opposite side of the door leaf, there was a small handle to securely close the door. Manrique closed it and immediately felt a chill from head to toe. What if it won't open now? But no, he was lucky again. The test showed that it could be opened. The door was good, well made. He went out to smoke. You won't accidentally lock yourself out. In this manner, Manrique found himself standing on someone else's little balcony, somehow having gotten into someone else's apartment and someone else's life. How did I even end up in this mess? He wondered in amazement, not really understanding now why he got involved in all this. Manrique was generally a sympathetic person, kind by nature, and often suffered for it. Even in the early grades, he stood up for the weak and the bullied, and then the juvenile delinquent gang would desperately beat him up. And he, wiping tears and blood from his split lip or nose, would get up and jump into the uneven fight again. His mother, changing plasters and bandages, pitied him and wondered, "Why did you mess with them? What business is it of yours?" Apart from me, there was no one else to help him, Manrique would reply. I just couldn't stand by. Once, the boys brought a tiny, skinny kitten to the class. Dragging it out into the schoolyard during the long break, they tied it up with strings, wrapping its belly and neck, and hung it from a branch, and they lit a bonfire under the tree, laughing as the unfortunate little creature writhed, trying to escape the burning heat. "What are you doing, you monsters?" Manrique shouted when he saw what his classmates were doing, and without thinking, he burst into their tight circle with a piercing cry, swinging his backpack desperately. Unthinkingly, he also picked up a stone and hit one of the tormentors right on the head. The guy fell on the grass, and the rest scattered with cries, shouting, "Stop this lunatic, he killed Roberto." What happened at school after that? Roberto was taken to the infirmary, stitches were put in, and he was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. The entire teaching staff was on edge. They investigated for a long time what had happened and how. The local police officer came, interrogated everyone who was involved in the fight and who wasn't. All parents were summoned, a full-blown investigation was launched. And Manrique sat at home, locking himself in his room, applying ointments and bandages to the burned wounds of his little rescued friend, as the veterinarian taught him. First thing, he rushed to the vet clinic with the kitten, paying no attention to his own bruises and cuts. "Oh, my poor little hero, defender of the oppressed," his mother lamented, not really scolding. His father, tousling his son's unruly hair, just asked, "How many were there?" "6, Manrique answered with a pout. "Well, you almost held your own," his father suddenly laughed. "What do you mean?" The boy didn't understand. "You're brave, like little Taylor from the Grimm Brothers' tale," his father laughed, took down 7 with a single swing. Little Manrique smiled at his father, his mouth wide open, missing a front tooth, and beaming with happiness that he wasn't being scolded. In the end, they healed Roberto's head, a new tooth grew, and the kitten recovered, eventually growing into a huge, glossy cat. It followed his little friend like a loyal dog and hissed menacingly at anyone who could potentially hurt him. Since then, no one messed with Manrique, and the local kids, cats, and stray puppies sighed with relief. It turned out similarly in his subsequent adult life. Only there was no one to stand up for Manrique himself, and he got himself into various messes that he had to sort out himself. He got married, one could say, on a whim. He was dating a girl he really liked. And his closest friend, Mateo, was dating her friend. At one of the parties, Manrique and Eva argued over some nonsense, and the quarrel dragged on for several weeks. One day, leaving his house, Manrique found Paulina, Eva's friend, crying on the bench near his entrance. "And what about you?" He, true to his compassionate heart, sat down next to her. "Nothing," she snapped. "Go on, mind your own business." "Well, come on, Paulina," he said gently, not to hit on her, but just to comfort her as a human. "Stop crying, tell me what happened. Where's Mateo? If you don't want to talk to me, tell him. I'll call him now." "No!" Paulina suddenly erupted. "Don't you dare! Are you really blind? Can't you see anything? What should I see?" Manrique was surprised. "Really, you know nothing?" Paulina squinted. "No. What's the matter?" Manrique was puzzled. "Your beloved Eva is now dating Mateo, that's what." Paulina blurted out, trembling with anger. "Oh, come on." Manrique didn't believe it, confident that his buddy Mateo wasn't capable of such betrayal. And he couldn't be mistaken about Eva. "You big fool," unexpectedly Paulina said affectionately, touching his hand. "You always look at the world through rose-colored glasses. You believe everyone like a calf, but you know, the world is much harsher than you think." She jumped off the bench and walked away, lifting her chin high and striding proudly and swiftly. And Manrique remained, furrowing his brows and pensively gazing off into space. After sitting like that for a bit, he walked over to Eva and knocked on the door. "What do you want?" She opened it, looking wary and sullen. To talk, he didn't let her close the door, putting his foot in the door jamb. "What is there to talk about now?" She got angry. "There's plenty to talk about." Manrique cautiously pushed her aside and entered the apartment. "What do you think you're doing?" "I'll scream right now," Eva threatened. "Eva, stop," Manrique pleaded. "It's me. Are you really afraid of me? Why did you just barge into my place like this?" She stood in front of him, crossing her arms. "I just want to clear things up between us. If I've done something wrong in your eyes, please forgive me. I'll do anything for you, just to have you forgive me. I love you, after all," he said softly. "Well, tell me, what should I do?" "It's not that simple," she sighed and looked away. "I can't see you anymore." "So, it's true that you and Mateo have something going on?" Manrique asked directly, breathing heavily. "Who told you?" Eva recoiled. "Paulina," he blurted out. She was sitting on the bench near the house today, crying her eyes out. "So, he did talk to her after all," Eva said slowly and blushed. "Why, Eva?" Manrique asked her with desperation. "Why did you do this to me?" I don't know, forgive me." She lowered her head and turned towards the window, pressing her forehead against the glass. "You better leave," she said hoarsely. "It's over, you understand?" Manrique didn't say anything and indeed left. He left her life forever. The next time they exchanged a couple of insignificant words was only a few years later, when she had already divorced Mateo and he was still married to Paulina. Yes, Paulina knew how to keep a guy, and she successfully did it all with him. Manrique didn't have time to look back before she told him that she was pregnant. "We're having a child," she said, looking at him trustingly and proudly. Manrique opened his mouth to say something like, "What? We didn't plan anything like that." But instead, he barely managed to squeeze out, smiling like a complete idiot. Really? Yes, she nodded affirmatively. I've already been to the doctor. And so, a couple of months after what he thought were meaningless encounters with Paulina, he suddenly realized that he would soon be a husband and a father. Manrique's parents were no less surprised and disappointed than he was by his son's early marriage, but there was nowhere to go. The girl was pregnant. They got married right after finishing school. And in the fall, Manrique was drafted into the army. After completing his service, he returned to his young wife, his 1.5-year-old son, and a whole heap of domestic problems. He had no education, no job, no place of his own, but he had to find a way to support his family. Paulina and little Alejo lived with her parents for now. At an extended family meeting, it was decided to take out a joint loan and buy a small flat for the young couple. They'll get on their feet and pay it off, both sets of parents decided, and they put their plan into action. Manrique became a taxi driver. He had known how to drive for a while. His father had started teaching him when he was only 12. By 16, he was already confidently maneuvering on country roads and had completed driving school. As soon as he turned 18, he got his driver's license. He got a car from a company on lease. The work wasn't bad, life seemed to be getting better. But you need to think about education, his parents said. And Manrique understood that they were absolutely right. In today's times, where could one go without education? He didn't want to spend his whole life as a driver. Although the idea of a career as a long-haul trucker actually appealed to him quite a bit. Why not? Drivers on international routes made quite a decent income. But his parents, and along with them, Paulina, insisted that he enroll in university. Go for economics, his young wife urged. It's a highly demanded field now. Besides, you've always been great with math. This time, Manrique went with the flow again, submitted his application for a major that suited his family, but he didn't get accepted. He didn't quite make the cut. So, he went with a clear conscience and submitted an application to an auto mechanics vocational school. They accepted him with open arms. Nowadays, students with good school certificate and no dark marks in their history were as valuable as gold in technical schools. And so? Paulina wrinkled her nose. Are you planning to be a silly driver all your life now? Well, not really, Manrique defended himself. I can work as an auto mechanic. Good specialists are always needed. I might even pursue higher education in the field later. I'll get a job at a major automobile company. They pay well too. Oh, sure, they're really in short supply of you in major companies. Paulina was getting angry. She was often angry in general and was constantly dissatisfied with everything. Manrique understood that as a husband and father, there wasn't much he could offer her yet. But did he ever push her to have a child? Did he propose marriage? She could see perfectly well that he was just an ordinary guy. So, why was she throwing tantrums now? No one was to blame for what had happened. You could have used your head and at least protection, he often answered Paulina mentally when she started voicing her complaints again and staging scenes and attacks, but he never allowed himself to say such things out loud. He loved his son with all his soul. Little Alejo meant everything to him in this world. After school, he dashed home as if on wings to see his son, hold him in his arms, and play with him. Then he always managed to carve out half an hour to take a walk with him and would work until late at night. He allowed himself only half of the weekend each week, but Paulina was still dissatisfied, bleakly tallying up their meager finances every month. I need winter boots. Alejo has outgrown all his clothes. Father is paying for the credit for the umpteenth time. Maybe we can put him in daycare. He's so sociable, he probably won't take long to adjust, Manrique suggested. You could also find some part-time work, couldn't you? What part-time job? The young wife yelled. You have no idea what these daycares are like. He's still too little. He's gonna start getting sick all the time, it's all viruses. You don't think about the child at all, only about yourself. You want to get rid of him and me too. All you care about is drinking beer with your friends. Paulina, what are you saying? Manrique exclaimed. I met with the guys once in 6 months, we hung out for a bit. Is that what you call excessive drinking? I work like crazy, even steady on top of it all, just to ensure a decent life for you and Alejo. If you don't want to put him in daycare, if you don't want to work, fine. I'm not forcing you. I just offered it as a suggestion, a possible option. Don't say I'm not doing anything for you. Paulina fell silent, sulking, walked around with a gloomy face for a few days. Then she would calm down, her parents would give them money, and peace would settle in the family for a while. And then it would all start over again. They lived this way for 2.5 years, until Manrique graduated from the technical school. On his graduation, Paulina gave him a keychain with Volvo branding and jokingly, half seriously said that now he had to excel in his profession to buy a car like that for the family. And he gave her money for a fur coat, secretly saved up, to make his wife happy. She had long wanted that fashionable winter item and never forgot to reproach him during each argument, pointing out that all her friends had fur coats. Manrique expected anything: gratitude, joy, ecstatic squeals, or at least a simple smile. But instead of any of that, she got angry like a tigress and started saying that if he thought he could make it up to her this way, he shouldn't even think about it. After all, they had an underage child, and he shouldn't forget about that. Manrique was at a loss, unsure of what to think or how to understand her. She wanted a fur coat, he gave her money for a fur coat. What else was needed, it seemed? Since you managed to save up so much, she said sarcastically, then you must have hidden something else from me in secret. How would I know? Maybe you even have a mistress. It's not for nothing that you're out until 4 a.m. Manrique simply couldn't say anything to her anymore. He had no energy left for conversations. He just waved his hand and left with his friends to celebrate graduation. They had a good time that day, it must be said. He didn't return home for 2 days, and when he finally did, he found neither his wife nor his son. The apartment was empty, belongings were gone, and there was a note on the table: so, I've found another man, he's ready to take me and our son and provide for us both as we deserve. And to you, dear, I wish all sorts of success. I'll send the divorce papers by mail. I'm not claiming this little apartment, don't worry, and I don't want anything more from you. However, she did take the money for the fur coat with her after all. The parents of the young couple argued for a long time about who should now pay the credit and what to do with this little nook. Manrique listened to both sides, and then he said, I found a good job. I've been invited to work as a mechanic at an official service center with opportunities for career growth. I don't want to give up taxiing either, let's see how it goes. So I'll pay off the loan and your share too. He nodded towards his wife's hapless parents. I'll pay it out over time. I don't think it'll take long. Can you wait a little? But only considering that we've already paid, agreed the father-in-law. Of course, Manrique replied. And that was settled. Now he worked during the day at the Suzuki Auto Service, and in the evenings, sometimes even at night, and on holidays, he continued to drive a taxi. He saw his son when Paulina allowed. They now lived in a big private house with her new beau. Apparently, he did have money, and Paulina had always been a pretty girl. And Manrique wished her all the best and wasn't even particularly upset about her leaving. After all, he had never loved her, that was the truth. But he missed his son a lot and really wanted the little guy to live with him, although he understood perfectly well that it was unlikely to ever happen. He asked Paulina for only one thing every time: not to hinder their communication. I want him to know who his father is, you understand? Please, don't deprive me of the opportunity to raise him. After all, he's my own son, my flesh and blood. Oh, calm down already, Paulina answered disdainfully, curling her lips. No one is planning to deprive you of your paternal rights or the opportunity to see him. If you can provide him with something useful, I'll be happy. But for now, he's still too little to be shuttling back and forth all the time, agreed? Let him live here, with me. Arturo doesn't want him to call him dad either, says the child should have just one father. See, you're in agreement on that. Certainly, here's the continuation of the translation with direct speech indicated using dashes. And thank God, Manrique said. And he tried. He tried his hardest to ensure that Alejo had the best of everything. He was earning well now, and the taxi side gig was very helpful in the sense that he didn't need to buy his own car. He could get everywhere in the work car, and if needed, earn some extra money. No one demanded a strict schedule from him, and everything was falling into place as perfectly as it could. He even got himself a cat again, or rather, the cat found him. One day, Manrique returned from work, and there was a healthy, handsome black cat with a white collar lying on the doormat in front of his door. "Hello," Manrique said to him, "where are you from?" The cat meowed in a welcoming manner but didn't hurry to leave. Manrique let him in, inspected him, fed him, and that's how the cat ended up staying. No owners for the feline were found. No one rushed to respond to the announcement that Manrique had posted on all the neighboring houses. "So, are we going to live together now?" Manrique asked him, and the cat squinted contentedly, almost as if smiling in response. Manrique was happy to have this company. Alejo liked the cat too. Its temperament was calm, which was good for a child. "Dad," the little boy asked, "can Kitty come with me to our home?" "Well, let's ask him." Manrique smiled and leaned his ear towards the cat, as if listening for its response. "He said he likes living here," the father translated the satisfied purring of the cat. "And if you want a kitten for yourself, let's find a little one for you. All right? Just ask Mom and Uncle Arturo first. Okay?" "Okay," Alejo agreed. However, neither the mom nor Uncle Arturo were inspired by the idea of getting a kitten. "We have a big and fierce German shepherd in our yard," the boy reported during the next meeting. "Uncle Arturo says it's already eaten 2 kittens and will eat this one too if we bring it." With that, the kitten question was closed, and Alejo enjoyed spending time with his fluffy friend when he visited his dad. Usually on weekends, either Saturday or Sunday. But in these particular weekends, they all went somewhere together for a vacation, and Manrique decided to work properly since Alejo wouldn't be in town anyway. And there he was, working. On Saturday, he met that odd couple, and then on Sunday, look at this, kind people, he was sitting like a thief on someone else's balcony, hiding from the owners. Oh, when will life teach him not to make such foolish mistakes? Such thoughts crossed his mind as he shivered on the balcony and strained his ears, waiting for the sound of the front door. He only waited until it started to get dark. And the bedroom was still quiet and dark when Manrique, cautiously pushing the plastic door ajar, silently slid inside. The woman seemed to still be sleeping peacefully, and there were no other sounds to be heard in the apartment. Turning around, he discovered that the woman who had been asleep recently was now sitting on the bed, her arms wrapped around her knees, and looking at him with the same pleading, piercing gaze. "It's you, isn't it? You really read my note? I knew you would come. Please, save me. You have such kind eyes, you won't leave a woman alone in trouble, will you?" She stood up from the bed and, just as she was, in a thin, almost transparent nightgown with thin straps, approached almost closely. "He wants to kill me, I know it," she began speaking in a quick whisper. Her hot, excited breath was so close that the scent of this woman made Manrique's head spin. "I know," she continued and took his hand, "he's wanted to get rid of me for a long time, he keeps me on pills, I'm in his way. Save me, please. Take me away from here." The woman clung to Manrique with both hands and convulsively touched him, breathing heavily and looking at him imploringly. I need to go," Manrique said, scared by her sudden outburst. Something was off here, something was wrong, and the whole room, the medicine, the pills, and the ambulance, it was all strange somehow. The door to the room swung open, deafening him like the sound of a gunshot. A dazzling light flashed, and Manrique, squinting from the unexpectedness, froze in place, expecting that he'd get busted any moment. Probably, her jealous husband would just knock him out right there, and that would be the end of it. But instead of that, there was laughter. Resounding, loud laughter, perhaps even nervous, almost sarcastic. Manrique cautiously opened his eyes and looked around in fear. Indeed, a man entered the room, the owner of the apartment, apparently. Now he stood in the doorway, staring directly at this scene. His wife, in the arms of another man who had somehow snuck into the house, and he was laughing, like a wild horse, unable to stop. Manrique no longer understood anything, he just stood there like a statue, blinking in confusion. Meanwhile, the woman, looking annoyed as if angry at something, climbed back into bed and covered herself with a blanket. She didn't lie down completely, but sat half-sitting, pulling her knees close to herself, and stared attentively at the one who had entered. "Oh God, again." The man who had entered finally burst out laughing. "I knew it, yes, I figured it out," he told Manrique, extending his hand and wagging his index finger at him like a schoolteacher to a misbehaving student. "I knew it, young man," he said again, grinning. "She slipped you a little note too, didn't she?" "Yes, she did," Manrique agreed, repeating the man's last word automatically and nodding. He was simply bewildered by this whole circus at home, and on top of that, he was freezing on their damn balcony. "Well, what can you do? You're not the first and apparently not the last," the man smiled bitterly at something known only to him. Manrique, on the other hand, still didn't understand a damn thing, he just stood there and smiled. "All right, let's go," the host suddenly took pity on him and added, closing the door, "Dear, if you need anything, just let me know." "All right?" "Yeah," the woman muttered sullenly, dissatisfied, and pulled the blanket over herself more. "Do you drink brandy?" the man suddenly asked Manrique as they walked down the corridor toward the exit. "BB brandy?" Manrique exclaimed once again over these abnormal weekends. "Well, yes," the man grinned, "or are you a teetotaler?" "No," Manrique shrugged, "I drink brandy, I'm just driving now." "Ah, yes," the man raised his hands theatrically, "and I forgot, you're a taxi driver, right?" Manrique remained silent gloomily, waiting for this strange individual to get tired of mocking him and finally call the police. "I'll have a drink," the man decisively announced. "And how about you have some coffee with me then, huh?" he suddenly added with a pleading tone. "All right," Manrique agreed. What else could he do? Having coffee with a stranger was the lesser evil in comparison to all the other troubles that could be expected in such an unconventional situation. They entered a small elongated kitchen. Manrique sat down in the space between the table and the refrigerator, almost as if he was hiding in that niche. The host, on the other hand, reached into a hanging cabinet and took out a bottle of cognac, poured himself a glass, then looked closely at Manrique. "Maybe just a bit," he proposed. "Well, okay," Manrique suddenly decided, frozen to the core from the weekend's events and completely disoriented. After all, he could leave the car here and just walk home, if need be. It was only a half-hour walk. And a shot of cognac would be quite welcome at the moment. "That's the spirit," the host clearly rejoiced and swiftly retrieved another plump glass. "Let's toast to our acquaintance." They clinked their glasses and drank. "What's your name?" the man asked. Manrique, our hero, mumbled with a mouthful, because along with the shots, there appeared snacks from the fridge, sausage, sliced cheese, bread, and some store-bought salad in little containers. "Excellent name," the cheerful host commented, "excellent. I'm Alejandro." "Very nice to meet you," Manrique replied, "let's have another one." Alejandro, without waiting for his drinking companion's agreement, was already pouring cognac. They drank more and then more. Soon a pleasant warmth spread throughout Manrique's body, but he didn't feel drunk, rather, he felt relaxed. Alejandro, on the other hand, didn't show any sign of drinking. He sat there just as he had been sitting, just a bit more cheerful, his eyes not as sardonic, that's all. "Well, Manrique," Alejandro sighed slightly, "I have to apologize to you." "Apologize?" Manrique was baffled. "For what?" "For my wife's behavior," Alejandro answered darkly. "You see, she's mentally ill, understand?" He dropped that word like a stone into water and let out a heavy sigh. I see, Manrique said sympathetically, mentally scolding himself. What a fool, he could have guessed. Those eyes. Normal people don't have eyes like that. She writes notes and slips them to everyone. The man was now speaking more calmly, to doctors, nurses, neighbors, whoever happens to be around. Don't worry, you're not the first one caught up in this situation. There are compassionate people, good people. They think that she's really in trouble, he chuckled bitterly, but, I have to admit, you're the first one who managed to get this far, he laughed again, now with a touch of sarcastic approval. It takes a special kind to break into an apartment like this. You're like Zorro, Manrique. By the way, how did you manage to figure out where we live and all that? Manrique, blushing and stumbling over his words, recounted everything as it happened, and with a guilty look, he glanced at the apartment owner. The man sat there thoughtful, looking at Manrique as if trying to see inside him. How old are you? He finally asked. Probably not over 25. You're close, Manrique answered, embarrassed. Phenomenal, the man shook his head, smiling sadly about something, and I'm almost 50. I could have a son your age by now. Yeah, and he nodded in the direction of his wife, and Manrique understood that he was talking about her. She's 37. You wouldn't guess that, right? She's a beauty. He proudly declared without waiting for a response. Manrique understood that he didn't really need a response, he just needed to let it all out. For Alejandro, his strange young man who foolishly entered his apartment turned out to be like a chance fellow traveler on a train. You can pour your heart out to chance companions, tell them everything on your mind. The chance of meeting that person again after saying goodbye on the platform is practically zero. It's like talking to a priest or a psychotherapist. Alejandro was in the mood to talk, and Manrique, surrendered to the fate that led him to this kitchen, was ready to listen. The day was drawing to a close anyway, and there was no point thinking about work anymore. After 3 shots of cognac, he certainly wouldn't be able to get behind the wheel. But I don't need more, he pleaded, seeing that Alejandro was about to pour more. I have to work tomorrow. Ah, work, that's good, Alejandro sighed. But I'm stuck here now, tied up, he suddenly swore harshly, and my work goes on without me, mostly. In the end, he told Manrique the story of his life with his wife, everything, down to the smallest details. Once upon a time, Alejandro was married to another woman, and the story of his first marriage reminded Manrique of his own. The girl got pregnant, and as an honest man, he had to marry her. The only difference was that Alejandro's girl was madly in love with him, and he was almost indifferent. But still, a child played a crucial role, just like in Manrique's case. Well, explain this to me, buddy, Alejandro spoke with enthusiasm. If a guy leaves his family, does that mean he abandons his child too? No, of course not, Manrique replied. I've been divorced too, but I'd never abandon my son. Oh, I see, the host raised an eyebrow, so you understand me, a man understanding a man. Let's drink. It was impossible to refuse. Manrique wasn't drunk enough yet to forget what he had done here. Catching up, Alejandro continued his story. We lived SOSO. She must have felt that I didn't truly love her. Women always sense these things. Arguments, constant groundless jealousy. I got tired, overwhelmed, and my business was just starting to pick up. It's hard when you have daily chaos at work and at home too. Manrique nodded understandingly at this point and suddenly felt that destiny had brought him here for a reason. Some premonition slipped into his soul and warmed there, purring like a contented cat. In short, we couldn't make the family life work, Alejandro summarized. We got divorced, and that was that. She was really good at making a scene, may the Lord prevent that. And when she found out I had someone else, she went crazy. I met Laura when she came to fix her car. I happened to be at the dealership purely by accident, but it turned out that I met her. Alejandro fell silent and smiled at some of his own memories, and Manrique, as if in a dream, saw the next scene vividly. A young, even more beautiful Laura drives into the upscale car service. She's healthy, sociable, and always surrounded by many men. Of course, a woman like her is always the center of attention. She walks into the showroom and asks the receptionist or the young manager, "Have a seat, please, available employee would be here soon. Would you like a coffee?" Laura smiles and nods politely. "Yes, please." And now she's holding a hot cup in her hands on a saucer and a branded little chocolate with the company logo, a compliment from the dealership. Just then, the glass sliding doors open and Alejandro enters. He's also young, handsome, and fit. He spots Laura right away, their eyes meet, they smile at each other, and a spark passes between them, like the ignition turning on inside an engine. "Good day," Alejandro says to her. "Allow me to introduce myself, I'm the owner of this dealership, here's my business card. You know, I absolutely must personally take care of such a charming customer. Let's go, let's take a look at your car. I'll call in my best mechanic right away." "Hey, buddy, are you even listening to me?" Alejandro's insistent question snapped Manrique out of his strange mental immersion in someone else's past. "Oh, yes, of course," he caught himself. "Please continue, I just imagined what a beautiful couple you must have been back then." "You, young man, have quite an imagination," Alejandro laughed, though it was clear he was pleased with the unexpected engagement of his listener. "So, I fixed her car up perfectly and didn't charge her a dime. I told her that instead of payment, she owes me a date. Well, not owes, I considered it an honor if she'd agree to go out with me. Oh God, she was something back then." Alejandro's eyes became moist. "I still can't get over how she turned out now," he sighed heavily. "Anyway, I took her to the most expensive and luxurious restaurant. I didn't expect anything like that on the first evening, of course. You can tell right away when a woman is on a certain level. They don't jump into bed right away, they know their worth. We talked, had drinks, had dinner. She told me a bit about herself, and I told her about me. And that's how it started for us. Restaurants, movies, theater, you know. Finally, it got to the point where she agreed to spend the weekend with me at a country club. I was clever about it. I gathered my coworkers to prevent my Luz from getting mad that I'm taking off for 2 days, like I'm tearing myself away from my family. At the company party, I may have overdone it a bit, had some champagne, got a bit tipsy, and introduced Laura to all the employees as my girlfriend. She liked that, I could tell. I just forgot, the fool that I am, that my Luz knows one of my female employees. Well, I completely forgot, you know. And of course, she spilled the beans to her immediately. And then it all started. I won't even go into all the details of how much dirt she poured on me. She didn't hesitate to criticize my daughter either, and she was only 6 years old at the time. What stress for a child? That same night, I packed my things and left her. We didn't have a real family left anyway, just appearances. I felt really sorry for my daughter. But what could I do? If we had continued bickering like dogs every single day in front of her, she wouldn't have gained much from that life, and she certainly wouldn't have become any happier. My fiancée stirred up the whole town, turned all our friends and acquaintances against me. It was like she declared a vendetta, I swear. As if I hadn't left a family, but instead devoured a dozen people alive. But the worst was yet to come. Believe me, neither I nor anyone else could have imagined something like this, even if they tried with all their might. Luz found out our address through acquaintances, where Laura and I were renting an apartment. She wrote me a note and left it at my workplace. Back then, we didn't have cell phones, saying that we needed to discuss something about our daughter. Come, she said, at such and such time, there's a matter concerning Veronica. Well, I fell for it like an idiot. I thought she finally wanted to suggest something constructive about our future, something that would help me communicate normally with Veronica. I thought she might ask for money. God, I was ready to give her anything, just to give her a decent life. But leaving with Laura was out of the question. I had built the entire business in this town with my own hands, and with blood, over several tough years. In short, I went home, to our former shared apartment, to this meeting she supposedly set up. Supposedly, because I arrived, but she wasn't there, and neither was our daughter, and nobody answered the door. Then a neighbor came out, heard me ringing for about 5 minutes. She said they had left about an hour and a half ago, and Luz took the daughter with her. They met on the staircase. She told her that she's taking the child to her grandmother's, and that she had some things to do herself. And then something stabbed me in the heart, you know, a feeling, a bad feeling, just one word, premonition. I jumped back into the car and rushed to my apartment. I arrive, and there's an ambulance, police at the entrance. At that point, my heart didn't just stab, it felt like it hit my heel, and my vision blurred, like fog. I barely managed to park, I swear. My hands became like cotton, slippery, I couldn't hold the steering wheel. I managed to clumsily get out of the car, and there they are, carrying Laura on a stretcher out of the entrance. Her eyes are closed, and a bloody stain on a white sheet spreads across her chest. God, I almost collapsed right there. And they're leading my ex-wife to a nearby police car, her hands in cuffs. I don't remember much after that. Only the neighbors later told me that I nearly smashed the police van with my bare hands, threatened to settle things with Luz on the spot. And she, that sneak, was looking at me with her shameless eyes through the window and smiling. But her hands were already in handcuffs, I remember that well, her gaze was horrifying. I only regained some semblance of awareness in the hospital. I'm sitting in a corridor, a long one, chairs, armchairs, and it's completely empty. And why am I sitting here? I can't even remember. Then I see a surgeon coming towards me, followed by another, and they're taking off their masks as they walk. And in that moment, I woke up as if from a dream, remembered everything, Luz, Laura, that horrifying bloody stain on the sheet. I rushed to the surgeons, I wanted to ask something, but my tongue wouldn't move. They were saying something to me, but it was like I couldn't hear them. Later, they said it was shock. From the psychological trauma I went through, apparently. Alejandro twitched his shoulders, and Manrique understood that he had just relived that old nightmare once again, as if he had just been there himself, as if he had seen it all through Alejandro's eyes. The apartment owner sat for a while, gazing out into the already dark window, and poured himself another drink, not even bothering to ask Manrique if he wanted to join. She survived, as you understand, said Alejandro. The knife missed her heart by 3 millimeters. 3 millimeters, you know? Oh, how I wanted to kill her. He slammed his fist on the table with force, making the bottle, glasses, and plates shake and seem to jump, but I restrained myself. A normal person can never harm another, never, unless it's in self-defense. And that scoundrel, the one I chose to be the mother of my child, she could. She definitely could. She simply called the apartment. Laura opened the door unsuspectingly, let her in. Luz behaved normally at first, saying we needed to talk. But when Laura turned her back to her, she grabbed a knife from the kitchen counter, the one my Lulu had been using to prepare something, and stabbed her in the back with all her might. Just like that. Alejandro fell silent again, closing his eyes heavily. The neighbor, eternal thanks to her, heard the shouts and the sounds of struggle and called both the police and the ambulance. If it weren't for her, Laura would be gone by now. And yet, she did manage to kill her after all. Yes, she achieved her goal. Laura never fully recovered from that, never returned to her former self. It took some time for her quirks to start showing. No, at first, she was just healing, getting better. Can you believe it, getting stabbed in the back with a knife? For a couple of years, she and I were going from one hospital to another, seeing various doctors. Other health issues, all rooted in her nerves, started popping up, her immunity weakened. A year later, she was near death again, a cold turned into meningitis. In these 2 years, I've aged all at once, and probably aged about 10 years. And her too, to be honest, though it hasn't shown on her appearance as much, she's still a beauty. Right? Manrique hurriedly nodded, agreeing with his companion, and he meant it genuinely. Laura truly was a very beautiful woman. Delicate figure, refined bone structure, as his grandmother used to say, an elegant profile as if carved from bone, fair skin, like ivory, huge eyes of an elusive, ever-changing color, well-defined eyebrows, a long, flexible neck, and flowing, almost silky, light honey-colored hair. But it took a toll on her internally, Alejandro continued with regret. After she finally healed, I took her to the seaside for a vacation, to recharge, as the doctors advised. I picked an excellent sanatorium, mountains, sea air, it was wonderful. I told her we would stay there as long as needed. At first, it seemed to help a lot. She started to revive, smile, laugh again. We went for walks together in the mountains, along the coast, went on excursions. It was a wonderful time. But in one evening, she changed completely, turned pale. I ran for a doctor, and when I came back, it was all over. She had a miscarriage. To say she was devastated would be an understatement. We went through the nightmare again. More doctors, more hospitals. And it kept happening, as if someone had cursed her. Just gets pregnant, a month or two later the miscarriage. Eventually, she completely lost it on this ground. I almost lost my sanity too when several doctors confirmed her diagnosis. So, we've been living like this for almost 8 years now. Dead children haunt her from time to time, then aliens, then talking dogs. And now a new obsession, now I've become her main enemy. He chuckled bitterly once again. Seems like I won't have to suffer like this for much longer. Can't leave her, can't live with her. Oh. Alejandro dropped his head into his hands and began to sob bitterly, not holding back and not minding Manrique's presence. Manrique, looking at this profound misery, could hardly breathe. It was evident that neither helping nor sympathizing with this misery was possible. Not that level, as they say in the rules of some pointless computer game he always hated, but the comparison was accurate. All lives burned out, and now no one would save them. I think I'll go now, he said timidly, waiting for Alejandro to calm down a bit. I'm truly sorry for causing you so much trouble. Oh, come on, the owner, getting up from the chair, walked him to the corridor and, with a sad smile, opened the door for him. Farewell, Manrique, as they say, don't think ill of me and don't worry. I've whined to you about my bitter fate, and it seemed to lighten the load a bit. Tomorrow is Monday, I'll go to work, Laura will have a caregiver, and on weekends, I'm always with her. Well, it's unlikely we'll see each other again. But you're a good guy, remember that about yourself, you know how to listen and empathize with people. That's a rarity these days. Take care, buddy, and he closed the door behind him. Finally in the stairwell, Manrique leaned against the cold wall and let out a deep sigh. So much had happened in just one weekend. And how much information, emotions, physically palpable sorrow he had experienced. He felt tangled up in all of this, like a fly caught in a spider's web. He thought it would get easier once everything was clarified, that mysterious note, yesterday's trip, Laura's strange behavior. But now that it had been revealed, things didn't get any easier, at least not yet. He shook his head, trying to shake off all that negativity, and stepped out onto the cold street. A piercing wind blew and drove violet clouds across the sky. Between the high-rise buildings, the wind was playing extremely unbearable tricks, and Manrique pulled his collar tighter, regretting that he didn't have a hat or a jacket hood. He'd have to walk back home like this, and then return tomorrow morning to get the car. But there was nothing to be done now, he had to go, and as fast as possible. A half hour of such a good walk dispersed the last remnants of alcohol, and he returned home completely sober, but tired, frozen, and utterly exhausted, like a stray dog. The cat greeted him as usual with a drawn-out businesslike meow. Automatically feeding the cat, Manrique stepped into a hot shower, enjoying the warmth and comfort of home under the scorching streams and washing away all the negativity he had heard and seen today. On this background, my problems aren't worth a damn, this was his last thought before he fell into a pleasant, relaxing sleep. Morning greeted him with a new shock, albeit a pleasant one. Paulina called and immediately startled him. Hey, can you take care of Alejo for a while? I've got a few discrepancies here, I'll tell you when we meet. Of course, no problem, Manrique was delighted. When should I pick him up? Can you do it right now? Paulina asked, and he could hear some strain in her voice. Right now? He was taken aback and thought, what about work? Where am I going to put him now? But then he suddenly calmed down. He had good, understanding bosses. He could bring Alejo to work with him, explain everything. If they didn't allow him to keep him during his shift, he could take a day off, and all would be fine. He'd come up with something later. I'll be there in half an hour, he confidently told Paulina and called a taxi to get to his workplace. It would take much more than half an hour to walk there and back. Here, son, this is where your dad works, he said to his son a little later. His son, like most kids his age, was bright and cheerful at 8 in the morning. Cool, Dad. The little boy expressed his admiration and immediately went to look at all the shiny car stuff. Who do we have here, such a charming visitor? Maybe a new auto mechanic? The head of the body repair workshop came out to meet them, smiling. Are you coming to work with us, like your dad? Yes, the little boy nodded importantly. I have experience. I've already unscrewed all the wheels on my toy cars. Oh, undoubtedly, Basilio chuckled. We definitely need workers like you. Come on, try to unscrew this, and he handed the boy a huge wrench, directing him straight to a dummy car placed on a promotional stand. Can he stay with me today? Manrique asked. Unexpected situation. My ex-wife called in the morning, asked me to pick him up. Tomorrow, I'll ask my mom to take care of him, and then we'll see. Sure, I'll let you go today. Manrique's boss suddenly brightened up. Just finish up the order, there's a little left, and then you can go. Just don't forget your golden worker, he chuckled and left the workshop. Thanks, Manrique sincerely thanked his boss and went to finish the order with a calm heart. Alejo at this time was completely under the spell of the girls from the sales department, and they chattered and giggled with him, vying to offer coffee, cookies, and candies. While working, Manrique once again realized that he was still digesting yesterday's late conversation with Alejandro. Some aspects of this story were unclear to him. For example, how did Alejandro's daughter end up with her mother if she committed such a terrible crime? She should have been imprisoned, and for a long time. Well, whatever, it's not my concern, Manrique brushed off his own thoughts. And that's enough of thinking about it. For a while, he actually managed not to think about it. He immersed himself in his favorite work, talked with colleagues, then finished up, picked up his little son, took him home. Alejo was glad to see the cat again and play with it properly. Manrique fed him soup with meatballs, which he still had in the fridge. Store-bought, of course, he certainly didn't cook soups himself, but it was good, and the boy even liked it. Your soup is tasty, Dad, he told Manrique. Now, put me to bed. I always get put to sleep after lunch. 10 minutes later, Manrique was sitting, drinking coffee, and watching with a smile as Alejo slept. It's amazing how quickly children fall asleep, tired, asleep, that's all. That's because they're not troubled by any problems, and their conscience is still clear, Manrique thought, amused by his son. And immediately his thoughts shifted to yesterday's events. Manrique muttered under his breath, here we go again. Well, why couldn't he switch his thoughts away from this damn family? Who were these people to him? Nobody, just random people, that's it. I need to forget about this as soon as possible. Forget. He ordered himself again. But, as usual, it didn't work out. On the contrary, a persistent feeling arose that he was missing something important, some small detail, a puzzle piece, as if he would put it all together, and the whole picture would become clear. And everything would make sense. Carefully cracking the balcony door open, he stepped out to his tiny balcony for a smoke. The cat slipped out to join him, curious to watch the birds. It loved doing that. As soon as the owner was on the balcony, it would jump onto the slender railing and look around. Watch that you don't fall, buddy, Manrique told the cat, but the cat completely ignored this caution and continued to sit there like a little perch, watching the passing birds. Manrique also stood nearby, leaning his hands on the balcony railing, one foot stepping onto it. Well, what kind of housing, such a balcony? What do you want? He mentally retorted to his imaginary interlocutor. He had a tendency to constantly talk to himself, pondering things. Grandma Agata in the village always used to say, "Our Manrique will become a philosopher, mark my words." Oh, how long ago that was. Manrique smiled at his childhood memories, and suddenly, as if struck by a jolt of electricity, he groaned and slapped his forehead with his palm. There it was. What an idiot he was. That's what had been bothering him and preventing him from forgetting about Alejandro and Laura, Grandma Agata, of course. That's who he needed. Let's go, he told the cat. We have urgent matters to attend to. Grandma Agata wasn't really his grandmother, not a blood relative, at least. She was somehow distantly related to his actual grandmother, who was who to whom in this complex web of relations only the old folks knew. It seemed even Manrique's mother struggled with these convoluted family connections. But the entire village simply called her Grandma Agata because she was everyone's grandmother. Whenever trouble or any unpleasantness struck, people went straight to her. She had the knack for listening, empathizing, and, most importantly, helping. She helped in a real and inexplicable way, without any herbs or spells, just by listening and looking. Children who fell ill with various ailments were always brought to her, and she would make them sit on her lap. She brewed coffee, regular coffee, but hers had a special touch, somehow different from others. And those pies she baked, oh, they were delicious. In Manrique's memory, back when he was still a teenager, they brought a man from the city to Grandma Agata. He had started drinking heavily after his wife's death and started seeing his deceased wife everywhere. The doctors said it was alcoholic psychosis, white fever as it's known colloquially, and shrugged. It's not treatable, they said, go see a psychotherapist or somewhere else at your discretion. But Grandma Agata calmed that suffering man down in one go. Yes, after spending a day with her, he came back to himself, as if a veil had been lifted. He stopped seeing the deceased, stopped drinking, and returned to work. He took care of his young children, who were left without a mother, and soon, it seemed, they could have been left without a father too. And how many people Grandma Agata healed like that, the village lost count, both young and old. She described her gift like this. This is God's gift to me. I don't even know how it happens. She never accepted money for it, God forbid, that's a great sin. She also didn't go to church, oddly enough. She would say with a smile, God has been absent from the churches for a long time now, only deceitful hypocrites are left there. She prayed at home in front of an old-as-time icon. Where she got it from was known only to her. She zealously hid it from everyone, but Manrique saw it once. He came over to have coffee with his grandmother one time when he was very young, but he remembered what he saw forever. Against a dark background, almost black, probably due to its age, who knows, there was a huge head of an old man, disproportionate and grotesque. Enormous, sorrowful eyes took up half his face. Humans don't have eyes like that. They stared as if they were alive, directly into you, right into your soul. He timidly stepped out from the back room then, retreating, unable to turn his back to those eyes. He felt that gaze on him for a long time afterward. The next day, Grandma Agata asked him, "Did you talk to the holy elder yesterday?" "No," Manrique replied, looking at her blankly, "I just looked." "Don't look anymore," the old woman ordered, "or you'll end up like me. Not everyone can bear such a burden. You've seen enough, now you too will look into people's souls." Of course, back then, Manrique didn't understand a thing and soon forgot all about it, the strange icon and that living gaze. But now, remembering Grandma Agata, he recalled that incident as if it had happened just yesterday. "Hi, Mom," he entered the hallway of his parents' apartment, leading Alejo by the hand. "Oh, my goodness," his mother exclaimed in joy, "who's come to visit us?" "Alejo, my dear grandson." And she immediately whisked him away to the kitchen to feed and spoil him. Manrique waited until the excitement settled, had something to eat himself, talked with his father about this and that, mostly about work, of course. His father was pleased with him, smiled, asked about his work at the workshop. Then Manrique went to the kitchen to talk to his mother. "Hey, Mom, how's Grandma Agata? Is she still alive?" "She's alive," she nodded, spry as a cucumber. "We went to the village with your father recently. She's doing great. Livelier than anyone," she chuckled. "But why do you ask about her? Or is something wrong with Alejo?" "No, he's fine," Manrique reassured her. "Paulina let me take care of him for a while, I don't know why. She promised to tell me later, I just didn't have time in the morning. But it doesn't really matter to me, the important thing is that he's with me." "You're a good son," his mother leaned over and kissed him on the head. "You've grown up to be a good person." "Well, then, what's your business with Grandma Agata?" "I need to help friends," Manrique said. "One of my friends has a very sick wife." "I see," his mother, satisfied that her son and grandson were all right, relaxed. "Well, let's call our grandma and ask her when Agata can see them. You know, she doesn't have a phone." "It's amazing she agreed to use electricity," the son laughed. There was an old village tale about it. The locals would constantly tease Grandma Agata, saying she wasn't afraid of electric light but ran from the phone like it was fire. Children offered to install it for her so many times, but she always refused. Why was that? "Light is necessary for practical purposes, but your phones are just for idleness," Grandma Agata answered them. "What do you do with phones? You just chat all day, ruining your souls. The soul can't tolerate idleness, it starts to darken and wither." Both relatives and villagers laughed at her quirks and soon shrugged off these eccentricities of Grandma Agata. Well, if she didn't want a phone, so be it, the neighbors could always call her. "Can you take care of Alejo tomorrow?" Manrique asked. "And maybe a couple more days. I'll find out from Paulina what's happened with her, I might take some time off work." "Yes, of course," his mother beamed, "no problem, leave him with us today, and you can stay the night." "I'd love to," Manrique smiled, "but I have my cat, you know." "Oh, you and your cats," his mother kissed him and waved. "Well then, off you go. I'll call you when I find out about Grandma Agata." The next day, Manrique managed to talk to his ex-wife on the phone. She was upset and irritated again, and Manrique found out a bit more than the day before. Paulina was sick with something, apparently something quite serious, though she didn't specify. But she had to go to the hospital for urgent surgery, as she told him. "Nothing serious. A couple of days, and it'll be fine. Then I'll recover a bit more and get Alejo back. Manrique, let him stay with you for a week. Okay?" "No problem at all," Manrique told her. Yet he asked anyway, even though he didn't plan to. "Do you need any help?" "Oh, I don't need anything from you," Paulina retorted on the other end of the line. Suddenly, Manrique had an unexplained feeling that the situation might be far more serious than she was trying to convey. "If you need anything, just let me know. I'll help however I can," he said firmly to her before she hung up. A couple of days later, his mother informed him that Grandma Agata wouldn't be receiving anyone this week and until the May holidays. She didn't say why, there must have been a reason. She had always been very selective in choosing who to help. She never helped strangers or newcomers, only those from the village who vouched for them. "I'm not an all-powerful, I can't help everyone in the world," she would firmly explain to those seekers who tearfully begged for her benevolence, earning herself a reputation as a strict and unapproachable woman. There was another peculiar aspect to her. No one could enter her home without being invited by the mistress herself. It was as if an invisible barrier blocked the way. Many tried, especially those same rejected seekers, as she called the people who came to her door in droves. But not one succeeded. The villagers had gotten used to the sight of strangers sitting on their suitcases in front of Grandma Agata's house. She paid them no mind, as if they were invisible. And never, not a single time, did she show any leniency. If she didn't know someone through one of the villagers, that person might as well not exist at all to her. Well, will she see my acquaintances? Manrique asked, slightly worried. She told our grandmother that she'll see them, his mother replied, but not before May. By the end of the week, it became clear that Paulina wouldn't be picking up Alejo yet. She didn't answer phone calls at all, and on Friday, she only messaged that she would be staying in the hospital for another week. She would let him know when there's clarity. Manrique was somewhat concerned, not so much for her, but for Alejo. What was going on? What should he do with his son? Should he enroll him in daycare already or wait a bit longer? If he is going to enroll him, he'd need to handle the paperwork, but Manrique didn't even have Alejo's birth certificate. Everything was with Paulina. For now, it seemed his mother was okay with watching over him, even happy to, but it couldn't go on like this forever. In the meantime, while the situation remained unclear, Manrique decided to visit Alejandro again, tell him about Grandma Agata, and try to convince him to take Laura to her. He had no idea why he personally needed to do this, but he was acutely aware that he had to. He just had to, that was all, so he went. He parked near the familiar building, got out of the car, realized he didn't know the entry code and couldn't recall the apartment number either. He stood by the intercom, trying to decipher which buttons were still visible and which were most likely to work based on where. Pressing various combinations of what seemed to be the four most viable buttons yielded no result. The intercom buzzed, but the door didn't unlock. Frustrated, he decided to wait again, hoping someone would open the door. He sat on a bench near the entrance and was once again surprised by the absence of people around. The weather was nice, the sun was shining, it felt like spring, so there should have been children playing in the courtyard. There was a playground there, but there was no one around, as if all the residents had vanished. There wasn't even a single annoying old lady sitting on the benches. It all felt quite strange. Manrique finished his cigarette and tossed the butt into a nearby trash bin. Just then, the entry door chirped, and Alejandro walked out onto the street. "Good day," Manrique approached him. "I actually came to see you." "Who are you?" The man stopped and gave the young man a suspicious look, as if not recognizing him. Then he ran a hand over his eyes, as if brushing away an invisible veil, and casually said, "Oh, it's you, Manrique. Sorry, didn't recognize you at first. What do you need?" "I came to talk," Manrique answered, somewhat hesitantly, and immediately felt how unfortunate and uncomfortable this sounded. Alejandro would most likely send him away now, rightfully so. Who wants to engage in conversation with random strangers again? "I need to leave now," Alejandro said. "Let's talk later, okay? And not here. Do you know the Café Robinson?" Manrique nodded. The cafe was conveniently close to his workplace. "Great, let's go there then." Alejandro checked his watch. "Around 9, all right?" "Okay," Manrique quickly responded. "I'll come. Maybe I can give you a ride?" He quickly added, "No, thanks, I have my own wheels," Alejandro said and headed towards his Hummer parked almost directly across the street. Manrique whistled softly as he watched him. He only now noticed the car. It was quite impressive. So, it was Alejandro's car. He must indeed have a good business. But why did he live here? This wasn't a wealthy or prestigious neighborhood by any means. However, it was probably related to his wife's illness. The Hummer revved to life, its electronic horses neighing under the hood, as if a whole herd were housed in there, and it disappeared around the corner. Manrique hopped into his yellow taxi and first drove home to feed his cat. Then he headed to his parents' house to spend the rest of the evening with Alejo, take a walk with him before bedtime, and then head to the meeting with Alejandro. Inside Robinson, the air was thick with smoke and noise. It had that kind of rough and masculine atmosphere. People here drank strong drinks, listened to rock music, and smoked like there was no tomorrow, following rules set in stone long ago. "Well, have a seat, buddy." Alejandro was a bit tipsy already, and because of that, he seemed more cheerful than 3 hours ago. "What brings you back to our sorrowful abode? Or did you forget something last time?" No, I didn't forget anything. I want to tell you something, and he briefly outlined his plan to his conversation partner. So, Grandma Agata, huh? Alejandro sat there, fingers locked together, his expression focused and stern again. You know, buddy, I don't believe in Grandma's sorcery. I don't believe in any sorcery either, Manrique agreed, not in any kind of sorcery, just in Grandma Agata, only her, because I've seen it many times, and not just me, practically our entire village has seen how she helps people. If that were true, Alejandro reasoned, your Grandma Agata would be a worldwide sensation right now, like that same Vanga, and there would be kilometer-long lines at her gate. And there are lines, Manrique concurred, but she doesn't see anyone. And no one can get to her without her invitation. Then why hasn't this phenomenon been covered in newspapers, shared on social media, and proclaimed to the whole world by now? Alejandro squinted. I don't know, Manrique honestly admitted, I haven't really thought about that. Maybe it doesn't work without her willingness. You're just telling me some sort of nonsense, Alejandro shrugged and signaled to the waiter to bring him another drink. This time, Manrique didn't drink with him, and he didn't even order coffee for himself. He didn't feel like having anything, and that wasn't the reason he came here. He needed to somehow convince this serious and obstinate man of the necessity of having his wife treated by Grandma Agata. He felt that Alejandro wasn't leaning towards his side yet, and he was painfully contemplating how to persuade him. But fate seemed to be on his side today, because out of nowhere, Arturo, Paulina's new partner, approached their table and, after asking permission from both Manrique and Alejandro to sit down, settled heavily in the seat next to them. Hey there, buddy, Alejandro raised his glass and clinked it with Arturo's. It turned out they were well acquainted. Shared business, Alejandro said shortly, glancing at Manrique, thereby explaining the nature of his and Arturo's relationship. Manrique suddenly realized that Arturo hadn't come to see Alejandro at all. Arturo was sitting on pins and needles, and his gaze wasn't directed at Alejandro but at Manrique. Listen, we need to talk, he said to him and hesitantly looked at Alejandro. Can we step aside? Speak here, Manrique replied. I doubt Alejandro is particularly interested in our personal affairs. That's for sure, Alejandro waved his hand. Go ahead, Arturo, chat with the kid. I'll go freshen up in the meantime. All right, Paulina is seriously ill, Arturo said, swallowing hard. I already figured that, Manrique nodded. But what's wrong with her? Cancer, Arturo made a sorrowful grimace, the feminine kind. I'm really sorry to hear that, Manrique sincerely said. I'll take care of Alejo for as long as you need, just bring his documents so I can enroll him in daycare. I'll bring them, Arturo nodded, but there's something else. Paulina wanted to know if any Grandma Agata would agree to see her. She said you were aware. At this point, even Alejandro perked up, hearing that someone else was interested in the services of this mysterious grandma. I'll ask, Manrique nodded, I'll try, but I can't guarantee anything. All right, Arturo got up, I'll call you in a few days about the documents, bring them here or wherever you say. Agreed, Manrique also stood up and extended his hand. Arturo hesitated for a moment and then shook hands. Well done, Alejandro approved of his actions as Arturo left the cafe. Arturo's a slippery guy, but he seems honest. What's your business with him? You didn't divide up a grandma, did you? He winked at Manrique and smiled. Never mind, don't tell me if you don't want to. He poured himself another drink. My ex-wife went to him, Manrique said calmly, and took my son with her. And now she's sick, and my son is of no use to him, which I'm quite happy about. I see, Alejandro looked closely at Manrique. You seem like a decent guy, from what I can tell. And it looks like a lot of people are interested in your grandma's services, apparently. She's not actually my grandma, Manrique patiently explained, she's a distant relative. She's extremely unapproachable. If you were to go to her, you should first go alone and only then bring your Laura. She's agreed to see you now, apparently, but not before the May holidays, and then she might change her mind altogether. She's just that way, strange, in general. So, first you're trying to sell her to me, Alejandro suddenly laughed, and then, when I'm hooked, you're telling me that it might not work out. Well, you better make up your mind. How can I explain this to you? Manrique suddenly said something he hadn't intended to say out loud. I really don't want to meddle in your affairs, to beg you for anything. I don't need that at all, believe me. In fact, it's kind of repulsive to push, as you put it. But there's something inside of me, like a creature, that won't let me live peacefully and keeps insisting over and over again, help these people. You have to help them. Manrique sighed and suddenly thumped his fist. So, please tell me, where can I escape from this? Alejandro stared at him as if he had just seen, at the very least, a real ghost or something of that sort. You know, kid, he finally said, for some reason, I don't even know why, I believe you. Let's go to your grandma. Spring had completely taken over the world when Alejandro and Manrique set out on the route to Grandma Agata. They were driving in Alejandro's Hummer, and halfway there, the owner of the fancy car let Manrique take the wheel. Manrique was delighted, like a child with a new toy, and he eagerly took the driver's seat, unable to hide his excitement. Cool, he said, grinning from ear to ear, stepping out at a gas station to switch back with Alejandro. It's not a car, it's a beast. Yeah, well, keep driving all the way, Alejandro waved his hand, you know the road. I'll just sit here and enjoy the scenery. Manrique realized that he had passed the driving test, and without needing to be asked twice, he hopped back into the driver's seat of the luxurious car. On such a vehicle, road imperfections were hardly noticeable. It felt as if the earth was sliding away from under the wheels. There were no potholes, bumps. The terrible country road had instantly transformed into a smooth highway. Ah, this is amazing! Manrique exclaimed in joy. And for some reason, he found himself suddenly asking Alejandro about something that he hadn't understood in the story he'd heard earlier. Why did your daughter stay with her mother? You said she turned her against you. But how could they leave a child with her after all that? That's how it went, Alejandro shrugged. I was shocked myself. Her family hired some super-duper lawyer who crafted the story just the way they needed it. Supposedly, Luz was in a state of shock when stabbed Laura with the knife, like she didn't know what she was doing. She was put on trial, but she didn't even receive a proper sentence, just 2 years of probation without imprisonment. They claimed there were mitigating circumstances, no prior convictions, and a minor child in her arms. And the fact that she nearly killed an innocent person that didn't matter at all. After the trial and completing that probation, she left the city with Veronica. I tried to communicate with my daughter, wrote to her, called her, even went to see her a couple of times, but every time, Luz would start such a huge scandal, it was like dealing with a lunatic. She would shake all over, the child would be crying. Eventually, I stopped trying to mend things. Maybe I was wrong, probably I was wrong. I should have tried harder, maybe even taken Veronica away from her completely. A woman like that shouldn't be raising a child. And now Veronica doesn't want to know me. She's probably right, Alejandro sighed. She's 22 now, and over half of her life has been without me. And I don't have any other children, and I won't. Who knows what the future holds? Manrique comforted him as best he could. Another hour passed, and they were already at their destination. There was Grandma Agata's gate. And there was a crowd of those in need. They were sitting across the way, as always. It was a necessary prop of the village, an element of the rural landscape, one could say. But this time, as Manrique jumped out of the car, he almost physically felt the pain of each of these unfortunate souls silently sitting across from the coveted gate. He suddenly felt unbearably ashamed in front of them. Lowering his head, he tried to quickly slip through the ordinary, old, gray gate made of weathered, falling apart boards. Alejandro followed behind. No one from the crowd moved, they just followed them with sorrowful looks, and that was all. "Hello, Grandma Agata," Manrique greeted the old woman. "Mom sent this for you," and he placed a bag full of groceries on the table in front of her. "Put it in the sideboard," the owner commanded sternly. "You can't just put bags on the table." "Now, who did you bring me here?" Without looking at Alejandro, as if he wasn't even there, Grandma Agata asked, sitting down at the table and folding her hands like a schoolgirl in class. "This is Alejandro. His wife is ill," Manrique said and gestured towards his companion, like saying, "Take a seat." Alejandro, even somewhat nervously, sat down on a low stool. "Don't be afraid, it won't fall apart," Grandma suddenly said mockingly, and then jumped up from her seat, snapping her fingers right in front of Alejandro's nose. He immediately hung his head and began snoring. Manrique widened his eyes, not believing what he was seeing. "What? Why?" he began, stumbling over his words. "Be quiet," Grandma ordered him. "Start telling." "Not about them," she laughed, as Manrique was about to tell her the story of Alejandro and Laura. "Tell about yourself." He had to comply. Jokes didn't work with Grandma Agata. After listening, she nodded. "Bring Paulina when she's out of the hospital, it will work out. She's a fool, of course, but you're a good one. Why did you get married?" "Well, the Manrique began. "Be quiet," Grandma scolded him again. "I know it myself, child." "So, did you want a stamp in your passport for the child? Now you're raising him without a stamp, right? So, what do these stamps matter?" "Oh, humans," Grandma Agata sighed sadly, pityingly, and spat on the floor. "Well, goodbye, dear." She decisively got up from her stool and waved Manrique away, like saying the audience was over. "But how?" Manrique started again, looking at Alejandro, who was still peacefully snoring. "Well, you'll manage with them on your own," Grandma informed him, as if it was self-evident. "All right, bye for now." The return journey took them, for some reason, much longer than the same distance to the village. For most of the way, both of them remained in a subdued silence. Alejandro, who hadn't seemed to fully wake up, was sniffling. Manrique, sitting in the driver's seat again, was deep in thought. What did she mean? How exactly am I supposed to manage? He asked himself. God, are these really all my problems? Why did I get involved in this? But he was already absolutely certain, although he still couldn't fully believe it himself, that from now on, this was indeed his problem. "Hey, what was that with your grandma?" Alejandro asked him as they parked in front of his building. "I feel like I've been hit with something, can't hold myself from sleeping." "Get some sleep, you really need rest right now," Manrique answered. He locked the car and handed Alejandro the keys. The latter promptly dropped them and stumbled toward the entrance. Manrique let out a heavy sigh, picked up the keys, caught up with Alejandro, put the keys in his pocket, and supporting him by the elbow, guided him into the elevator and from there into the apartment. Alejandro immediately collapsed onto the couch in the main room and started snoring loudly. Manrique stood by him for a moment, closed the door, and entered the bedroom. He told the caregiver, "You're probably tired. When does your shift end?" "Tomorrow morning," the caregiver said, surprised. "And who are you?" "Where's Alejandro?" "Sleeping," Manrique honestly said. "And it's time for you to go." The caregiver got up, nodded, and left the room. Manrique sighed again, as if he was about to do something unpleasant, and sat down by Laura's bed. "Laura," he softly called her and lightly touched her hand. The woman's eyes opened and looked at Manrique. Her gaze was vacant and hazy. "Laura," Manrique told her, "you're confused. Alejandro loves you very much, do you hear me? He's your husband, and you're his wife. No one wants to harm you, that's all in the past. Everything has long passed and ended. Let go of your sadness, stop suffering, stop hurting. You're still a young and healthy woman, everything will be fine with you and your husband. It's not me who decided this, it's Grandma Agata who ordered it to be conveyed. Everything will be fine, wake up. And I think I'll go, I'm feeling tired." Manrique got up heavily from the chair, feeling like a weight had been attached to each leg. Barely avoiding stumbling, he left the room and locked himself in the bathroom. He filled the tub with hot water, almost boiling, and immersed himself up to his neck. How long he spent there was unknown. When he opened his eyes, the bathtub was filled with cold, almost icy water. It seemed to have formed a layer of ice, if he remembered correctly. Shivering, Manrique got out, dried himself with a towel, got dressed, and left the apartment. And he never returned here again, nor did he ever meet the people he had once gotten to know while working in the taxi service. Alejandro woke up only late in the morning from the sound of someone mercilessly clanging pots and pans in the kitchen and singing horribly, beautifully, unbelievably well. In disbelief, he opened the door and shuffled to the kitchen. There was a flurry of activity going on. Laura was making pancakes while managing to clean up, turning everything she got her hands on upside down and shaking it out. "Oh, it's you," she smiled at her husband. "You finally woke up, my prickly hedgehog." Alejandro sat down on a stool and burst into tears. Huge salty tears rolled down his unshaven cheeks uncontrollably. Laura got worried, stopped cleaning, and came up to him closely. "Darling, what's wrong with you? Are you crying? What happened?" "Nothing. Nothing happened," he assured her, hugging her tightly as if he wanted to glue her to himself forever and never let go again. "You know, while I was away, you made an impossible mess here. Your grandma would be very displeased. Now I'll clean up properly everywhere, and then we'll go home. All right?" "All right, my dear, all right," Alejandro answered her. "Of course, we'll go home with you." Returning from vacation, Manrique came to the salon looking as shiny as a polished coin. Alejo had been going to kindergarten for a week and was full of new experiences. He and Paulina had agreed that their son would stay with him during the holidays and every other weekend. She herself was on the mend after visiting Grandma Agata a few days ago. At work, Manrique was in for a surprise. "Manrique, you're now in a new position. You've been appointed Deputy General Director for Technical Affairs. The entire service department is under your direct supervision." "What?" Manrique was astonished. "How is that possible?" "Oh, as if you didn't know," Zoraida, the salon manager, squinted. "Oh well, don't worry, I won't tell anyone." "What won't I tell? What are you talking about?" Manrique was completely bewildered. "About your connections with the CEO, of course," she laughed. "Here's the order, the CEO himself signed it, take a look. To appoint for the completion of the production task. To award a bonus." Further, there was a sum with lots of zeros that made Manrique's head spin, and a note that also surprised him, CEO Santos Alejandro. "So now tell the team what responsible task you were working on during your vacation," Zoraida smiled. "We guessed that you weren't sunbathing on the beach." "Right, not on the beach," Manrique agreed. "And one more thing. Our CEO moved with his family from here permanently and promised new personnel changes soon," the manager hinted meaningfully. "So don't forget to put in a good word for me when you talk to him." Manrique promised, though he didn't quite understand what and why. Understanding and processing what had happened to him that distant spring only began much later, while sitting in a small house he had repaired with his own hands. Of all that had been before, only the old, weathered gate remained in its original state, untouched by time and weather, and a simple wooden icon depicting an unknown saint with piercing, soul-searching eyes.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.